Yesterday, Matt and I harvested our cabbage, and today I've been trying to figure out what to do with it, how to preserve some of it. Some of it we'll put in the refrigerator and we'll eat on it, making slaw and fried cabbage and boiled cabbage. But a lot of it I'm going to put into jars. I want to preserve it somehow so that it's all took care of. Almost always the main thing we make out of our cabbage is kraut. And I have a video from a couple of years ago about making kraut, the fermented kind of sauerkraut. Matt and his family have always made it that way, making it in a crock. These days Matt and I use kind of a smaller crock than the giant one that his family used, but it's really, really good, and I'll link to that video so you can go watch it. Today though, I want to show you a different way of making kraut. I want to share with you the way that Granny makes it. I asked her a couple of years ago who she actually learned it from. She's made it my whole life pretty much. And she said she learned it from one of her uncle's wives. And one day they were talking about kraut, and she said, you need to try it the way I make it, and if you do, you'll never make it any other way. And Granny said, so I did, and it was really good, and that's how I've always made it. Now, it is kind of a strange recipe as far as people that might worry about if you need to pressure can or if you need a water bath or any of those things. And it is fermenting it. It's just a different way of doing it. It turns out really good, and it's a really simple process. Let me just tell you how Granny does it, and then I'll show you too. So first she sterilizes all of her jars. I've got some jars here and some over there sterilized. They're already sterilized. I've chopped my cabbage. When it comes to chopping your cabbage, you can do it any kind of way you want. If you want it really fine, Granny likes hers fine. Matt likes his coarse. I've done this kind of not really fine, but not really coarse either. I guess somewhere in the middle. So any way you want to do that, and I just used a food processor to do that, and that's what Granny does. She uses it. Then other ingredients that you're going to need is we're going to need 2 teaspoons of salt in each jar. Put 2 teaspoons of salt, and I would use pickling or canning salt. Then we're going to pack that cabbage down into the jar fairly tightly. You don't have to just pack it like a solid brick, but you want it pretty tight in there. On the very top of the jar, I've got something flying in my face, you're going to put 1 teaspoon of sugar. 1 teaspoon of sugar. Then you're going to fill the jar up with water. Now Granny just uses warm or cold water straight out of the tap. I've just got some here, kind of warm temperature. She did tell me that if you wanted to, you could use hot water and it'd make it work faster. That fermenting, a lot of times you'll hear older folks, especially in my area, say it's working off. My kraut is working off outside. And that's where Granny puts hers. She lets it work off outside on the porch, so if any bubbles out of the top, it doesn't make a mess inside the house. When Granny was telling me this recipe many years ago now it's been, she also told me a lady that lived down the road, who's no longer alive, passed away a long time ago, but Ruby Hemphill, that she made hers like this too, she told Granny, but she didn't put the sugar. She just put the salt. She didn't put the sugar. So that was another person in our area that was using the same method. Now once you do that, and you put I've got my lids and taps here already. Once you fill the jars up with water, then you put the lid on. Granny says screw it as tight as you can screw it. And I don't think you need to do it to that extent, but screw it tight, finger tight, I guess you would say. And then she just sets hers out on the porch, and she leaves it there pretty much usually till cold weather. And sometimes it bubbles out the top, and then sometimes it doesn't. It just depends. She puts like a tray or a box or something underneath it so that if it does, it wouldn't make a mess on your porch either, or if you set it on your table outside or something like that. You could certainly set it in your kitchen on a tray or in the garage or wherever you wanted to. And then Granny just leaves it until, like I said, usually till cold weather. And then she brings it in the house, cleans up the jars if if it does have sticky residue on the outside or anything like that, and then just puts them on her canning shelves until she's ready to eat it. That's it. She doesn't water bath it. She doesn't do any of that. Now, if you're worried about not water bathing it, I guess you could water bath it for 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. Or you could just make a few jars, since it's so easy, such an easy recipe, and leave it outside for maybe 2 or let it work till it quits working if you don't see any more stuff coming up or anything, and then just put it in your refrigerator. And if you're worried about like the timing of, well, how would I know when to put it in the refrigerator? fermentation will continue inside your refrigerator like at a cooler temperature, just much more slowly. It just won't be as, it won't work off as fast, to quote Granny, the way that she would put it. That's how she would put when you would know. It'll still be working, it just won't work off as fast in your refrigerator as it would if it was sitting outside. Now, another thing you'll hear about when you talk about making kraut in Appalachia, whether you do it the fermented way like me and Matt usually do, or if you do this method that Granny's using, or something else even, is people talk about doing it under the right sign. You want to do it under the right sign. Well, what does that mean? That means the right moon phase, basically. So, and a lot of families have different opinions about what the right sign is that you should do it in. Lucky for me and Matt, his family and my family both agreed that they like to make kraut or pickled beans and corn or anything like that that's fermented when the sign is in the head. And what that means is each zodiac sign has a body part that is connected to it, or symbolizes it, I guess you would say. So we like to make it when the signs are in the head. They are today when I'm making it. Now, a lot of people have, like I said, different opinions about that. So you may have heard someone else say, no, you should make it when the sign's in whatever. Matt's Aunt Wanda, I think it is, likes to make it when the sign is in the heart. So lots of different opinions about that. You just have to figure out what works best for you. So now I'm going to show you how to quickly, doesn't take long, whip up Granny's kraut here. I've got to get one of my sterilized jar. I'd be smart if I got me a towel to put down, because I know I'll make a mess. That way I catch some of the cabbage that I know that I will spill. I've got my jar. I'll put my 2 teaspoons of salt in the bottom, and of course it doesn't matter. You could put it all in the, you could go ahead and put the sugar, you could put it all on top. Either one would be fine. This is just how Granny, her method of doing it. And then I'm going to start putting my cabbage in. It down in there a little as I go. It's nice, pretty cabbage. Our cabbage did pretty good this year. We should have harvested it about a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, but it still turned out okay. I think that's all I'm going to put. Take it down some. And get my teaspoon of sugar. And then I'm going to better put my funnel back. Add me some water. Okay, that's it. I'll get me a lid and screw it on tight, and there you go. That's how Granny makes kraut. I'll do one more jar here. I'll be interested to see if you've ever, maybe your grandparents or your mother or anybody like that, maybe one of your aunts, if they made kraut like this in the jars. You can also make it just with the, you know, kind of the same method that if you watch the video that me and Matt did as far as making it in a crock or a small glass container like we used. You can also make it in the jar like this with just salt. I did that often when I would teach a cooking class, a week-long cooking class. Like the first day we'd make 1 jar of kraut just so they could see the process. Wasn't really time for it to be finished working by the end of the week, but still it gives you the general idea of how to do it. there and get me my sugar, my water. After Pap retired, didn't work anymore, he'd help Granny, and they'd have an assembly line going down there with one of them chopping and one of them filling and adding and doing the water and sealing up the jar. They really enjoyed eating kraut. I mean, I do too myself, but it goes so good with cornbread and soup beans, weenies. If you want to fry up a weenie and put in it, you can make a meal on that for sure. Sugar. I'm glad to have this chore done. It feels good to actually have some of the cabbage we grew in some jars. I ended up with seven jars. Over here on the counter, I've got some other things going on with some of the cabbages that we grew. I'm trying a new recipe. It's coleslaw in a jar is the name of it. Someone sent it to me. You could probably do an internet search and find it yourself. I've never tried it before, so I have no clue if it'd be any good or not, but it sounded good and I want to try it. It's the cabbage, a carrot, red onion and peppers, and then you mix it with some like a vinegar base, and then you put it in the jars and water bath it. So I'm going to try it. Sounded good. Sounds like something Matt would really like, so I wanted to try it for him, and I'll let you know what we think about it. It feels sort of special this year to make Granny's recipe just because she's been sick, you know, and we're kind of facing the unknown with Granny, so I thought I would make it this way, kind of a tribute to her. And of course, she's been on my mind for days, and every time I turn around, I'm worrying about her. So seems like the right thing to do this year. And I've eaten her kraut. I know how good it is. Every year she'll say, "You got to take you a jar of this kraut. It's so good. You just won't believe how good it is." I opened some today and had it with cornbread. Or back when Daddy was still alive, she'd say, "Me and your daddy opened a jar and we had cornbread and some fruit and some streaked meat, and it was so good." And when she says fruit, she means applesauce. That's what she's talking about. A lot of older people in my area, it's just like fruit is apple, because what else could it be but apple? So they just call applesauce fruit. I should try to continue that. I don't. I call it applesauce. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed seeing how Granny makes her kraut. Please leave a comment if you know someone else that does it like this, or if you've never seen it before. Again, if you're worried about just leaving it in the jars like Granny does, or like I'm going to do, you could certainly just make 1 or 2 jars, see if you like it or not, and put it in the refrigerator and keep it that way until you eat it, or feed your family with it, and see if you like it, see if it's worth doing again. As always, I'm always thankful when you drop by to help me celebrate Appalachia, and I love sharing these things like this that come from one of Granny's aunts, was her uncle's wife, so aunt by marriage, but still, for so many years ago, and there's no telling where she learned how to make it, those kind of things, and even the kind of the connection with the lady that lived down the road from us, Miss Ruby, and she's been dead for a long time. And I don't have that many memories of her, but I have a few. But knowing that she made hers like this too, I just love that connection, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about it too.